A few weeks ago, I lost my dad after a long battle with illness. My name is Kelly, and as I process his passing, I often find myself regretting that I never got the chance to introduce him to his grandchildren. This thought weighs heavily on me. 5 years ago, at 37, I got married. On that joyous day, my dad and I made a special promise. I would be the first to tell him if I was expecting a child. Now, with his passing, it's a promise I'll never be able to keep. It's my biggest regret, and the thought of it stings deeply. Dad's illness was discovered a year ago, and from that moment, I did everything in my power to be there for him. I started visiting our childhood home more frequently, spent countless hours with him and my mom at the hospital, and made sure to call or video chat as often as I could. Even though I made these efforts, I sometimes find myself lost in thought, wondering if it was enough. Could I have done more? Did I do everything I could to make his final year meaningful? One day, while expressing these doubts aloud, my mom comforted me with her usual warmth. "Kelly," she said, "you did everything you could, and your dad knew that. He was proud of you." As she spoke, my sister Julia walked into the room, accompanied by a man I didn't recognize. He appeared to be in his mid-40s. Julia introduced him, confirming my assumption. "This is Scott, the attorney." My mom immediately offered him a seat, and once we were all settled, Julia couldn't hold back her excitement. She mentioned that the lawyer had indicated our father left us a significant inheritance. Feeling uneasy, I responded, "Julia, you know it's not all yours." The atmosphere shifted instantly. My relationship with Julia has always been tense, and it worsened during our father's illness. I tried many times to bridge the gap between them, hoping she'd visit Dad, but her refusal only deepened the divide between us. Her attitude has been a constant source of friction, and it became even more pronounced throughout Dad's illness. I regretted the harshness of my words, knowing they were driven by the frustrations of those difficult times. But Julia's response only aggravated the situation. "You're an adult," I told her. "There's no need to be so stubborn." She snapped back, saying, "I'm not being stubborn. Traveling from the city to the countryside isn't as easy as you think." I reminded her it was just a 5-hour drive, but she dismissed me, saying it wasn't just about time. Money was involved, and she needed to prioritize her career. Julia was firm in her stance, telling me to stop pressuring her. That conversation marked the final fracture in our relationship. She never did visit Dad, and the emotional distance between us grew. The tension in the room reached a peak, but the lawyer intervened, urging us to take a moment to calm down. I took a deep breath and apologized, hoping to ease the atmosphere. With things slightly more settled, the lawyer began explaining the purpose of his visit. "As I mentioned over the phone, I'm here to discuss your father's will," he said. My mom, looking puzzled, asked quietly, "When was this arranged?" The lawyer responded, "A few weeks before he passed, your father reached out to me. He asked me to visit him at the hospital to finalize the documents." My mom looked surprised. "I didn't know. Were you able to do it?" "Yes," the lawyer confirmed. "Your father and his primary doctor were both present. Once the will was finalized, your father arranged for the doctor to notify me when the time came, which is why I contacted you now." He pulled out a white envelope, placing it on the table in front of us. I immediately recognized my dad's handwriting on it. Whispering, I said, "That's definitely Dad's handwriting." Julia, already growing impatient, urged the lawyer, "Just get on with it. You know I'm busy." The lawyer opened the envelope carefully and unfolded a single piece of paper detailing our father's wishes. He read aloud that Dad had left us the family house, some land, a modest amount of savings, and a storage shed, something we hadn't known about before. Julia, frustrated, cut in, "What about the farm?" The lawyer looked through the documents again and clarified, "The farm isn't listed as part of the inheritance." I explained to the lawyer, our dad used to work on that farm as a hobby. After running a successful business nearby, he decided to slow down after he turned 55. He talked about closing the business so he could spend more time farming. Julia seemed surprised by this, but I remembered how supportive Mom and I had been when Dad made that decision. We had all been concerned about his health and agreed that scaling back his work would be best. My dad reassured Julia at the time, saying, "Don't worry about money. We have enough savings." Julia had reluctantly agreed, though she never fully supported the idea. After finishing college, she built her career in the city, eventually marrying the CEO of an IT firm she met through work. She promised she'd visit home more often, but that promise faded over the years. Hearing the farm wasn't part of the inheritance clearly upset Julia. The lawyer explained that the farm had always been leased land, not part of our family's property. I realized I had misunderstood, thinking Dad owned a large portion of it. Julia's frustration was evident, but given how little we knew about farming, I thought it might be for the best. The conversation shifted to dividing the inheritance. The lawyer stated, "The house and surrounding land will go to your mother." Julia smirked, assuming the rest would be split between us. The lawyer continued, "The remaining assets, savings and the storage shed, are to be divided between you two." Julia immediately focused on the money. "Savings, that means cash, right?" "I'll take that," she said eagerly. The lawyer informed us the total savings amount to $300,000, and this sum is not subject to inheritance tax. Julia, feeling victorious, declared, "I want the $300,000 in cash." Her demand didn't sit well with me. "Hold on, I don't agree with that. Why should you get all the cash?" I protested. "Because I'm the eldest," she argued, as if that justified everything. Trying to dismiss the rest, she added, "You can have the storage shed." "What's that even worth anyway?" The lawyer explained, "The shed is located next to the farm. Whoever inherits it will own the structure, the land it's on, and everything inside." Suddenly, Julia's attitude shifted when she realized there was land involved. Although she was married to a wealthy CEO, her desire for more seemed insatiable. The lawyer clarified that the shed came with a small piece of land, only about 90 square feet, roughly the size of a small bedroom. Despite the modest size, Julia's greed had been ignited again, leaving me to wonder how far this inheritance dispute might go. The photos of the shed were laid out before us, giving a clear view of both the inside and outside. From the exterior, the shed looked run down, with its weathered wood and chipped paint suggesting it had been neglected for years. Inside, the space was filled with simple gardening tools, old hoses, scissors, and shovels. There was nothing remarkable or seemingly valuable in sight. The items held more sentimental worth than monetary value, reflecting my father's modest interests. When my sister Julia saw the photos, her expression turned into one of disgust. "I don't want this," she declared with a hint of finality, wrinkling her nose as she examined the images. Her rejection was immediate, her voice dismissive. To her, the shed was just a collection of dusty relics, unworthy of any effort or attachment. "Fine, you take the cash," she continued eagerly, clearly relieved at the thought of leaving the shed behind. She made it clear she wanted nothing to do with what she saw as a worthless inheritance. I frowned, feeling the unfairness of her decision sink in. "That doesn't seem right," I protested, realizing how unbalanced the division was. She would take the cash, leaving me with only the dilapidated shed. My sister, however, seemed perfectly content with the arrangement. "It's settled then," she said, her tone light and satisfied, as if she had just made the smartest trade of her life. Before I could object further, my mother interjected with a calm but passive comment. "As long as Julia doesn't complain later, I don't see a problem." My frustration grew at her words, sensing that my mother wasn't fully supporting me. Julia, with a confident grin, quickly chimed in, "Why would I complain?" She seemed delighted with the cash, eager to wash her hands of the shed and any sentimental burdens it carried. I felt cornered by their insistence, my objections drowned out by their enthusiasm. "You care more about Dad than money, don't you?" Julia challenged, her words stinging. Her statement left me momentarily speechless. Of course, Family meant more to me than money, but that didn't make her actions feel any less unfair. In the end, my mother inherited the family house and land. Julia happily took all of Dad's savings, and I was left with the old shed. To seal the deal, Julia even signed a document promising not to dispute the inheritance split. As she did so, she laughed, clearly pleased with her decision. Meanwhile, I tried to suppress my growing frustration, but it simmered just beneath the surface. Later, I turned to my mother, hoping for some support. "Why didn't you stand up for me?" I asked, feeling deeply let down. She gave me a soft smile and insisted she had helped. "I made sure you got the shed denied," she replied, as if that was a favor. "But I'm not happy with just a shed," I argued, struggling to see any real value in it. My mother remained optimistic. "You might find something unexpectedly wonderful if you give it a chance," she said gently. Despite my frustration, her words planted a small seed of curiosity within me. What if she was right? What if the shed held more than met the eye? Determined to find some meaning in this unexpected inheritance, I set off toward the shed with the key I had received from the lawyer. The path leading there was peaceful and quiet, barely used, and as I walked, the empty field surrounding the shed filled me with a sense of melancholy. It reminded me of how my father had leased a field until his health began to decline. Now, with the crops gone, the place felt desolate and untouched. When I reached the shed, I unlocked the door and was greeted by a heavy scent of dust and disuse. "Wow! It's really dusty," I murmured to myself, brushing away cobwebs that clung to the corners. The dim interior revealed nothing extraordinary at first. Just old farming tools, scattered haphazardly on shelves and in boxes. They were items my father had likely used over the years, carrying memories but no obvious material worth. Disappointed, I began to consider just gathering what little there was and moving on. However, as I looked around more closely, something about the shed struck me as odd. The interior felt smaller than it should have been, given the size of the structure from the outside. Was it a trick of the light? Or was I imagining things? The strange discrepancy nagged at me, piquing my curiosity. I decided to step outside to investigate further. Walking around the shed, I inspected every angle, hoping to make sense of the size difference. Then, hidden among a thick cluster of trees at the back of the shed, I found something unexpected. A second door. "Wait, another entrance?" I whispered in disbelief. From the inside, there had been no sign of this hidden door. It was completely concealed. My heart raced as excitement surged through me. This had to be one of Dad's secrets. He always enjoyed surprising us, delighting in small, clever tricks, like the surprises he planned for my birthdays when I was a child. With a mixture of nostalgia and anticipation, I re-entered the shed, determined to find the key that would unlock this hidden door. After a thorough search, I discovered 4 keys cleverly hidden inside the hollow handle of an old shovel. My hands trembled with excitement as I rushed back to the hidden door and tried the first key. It didn't fit. I tried the second. No luck. But with the third key, the lock clicked open and the door swung outward. Behind the door, in a cramped but carefully hidden space, stood a large, imposing safe. It was the same safe that had once sat in the corner of my father's office, a familiar sight from my childhood. Seeing it again brought a wave of emotions over me, memories of Dad flooding back. This safe wasn't just a piece of metal. It felt like a tangible connection to him, something he had deliberately left behind for me to discover. I knelt before the safe, my mind buzzing with questions. What could be inside? Was it a personal treasure, or perhaps a final message from my father? The discovery felt like the beginning of a treasure hunt, a puzzle he had crafted for me to solve. With renewed excitement, I inserted the third key into the lock of the safe. The mechanism clicked, and the heavy door creaked open. As I peered inside, my breath caught. The contents were beyond anything I could have imagined, a collection of items that revealed a hidden part of my father's life. This wasn't just a shed filled with tools. It was a carefully preserved piece of his legacy. Realizing the importance of what I had found, I quickly locked the safe again and made plans to move it. With my husband's help, we transported the safe to my parents' home for safekeeping. As I stood back and looked at it, a sense of peace settled over me. My father had left me more than just a shed. He had left me a meaningful connection to his life and a chance to uncover the stories he had never told. This was only the beginning, handling the inheritance and the unsettling visit from my sister. When I discovered that certain valuable items were part of my inheritance, I realized they could carry tax implications. Wanting to handle the matter responsibly, I decided to seek professional legal advice. Following the lawyer's suggestion, I consulted a certified public accountant (CPA), recommended by a friend to navigate the potential tax complexities. The CPA managed the valuation and tax requirements with precision, ensuring everything was in compliance with the law. It took nearly a year to sort through all the financial details, but things seemed to be moving in the right direction. Just when I thought the inheritance matters were settled, my estranged sister showed up unexpectedly at my house. Her visit was surprising given our strained relationship, especially after disagreements about the inheritance. She claimed she was just in the area, but since we lived only 20 minutes apart, her explanation felt contrived. Despite our complicated history, I invited her inside to be courteous. I served her some coffee, but she appeared restless, fidgeting nervously in her seat. Finally, she blurted out a question that took me by surprise. "Did you win the lottery or something?" Her sudden inquiry left me puzzled. I never played the lottery, and it wasn't the time of year for my husband's holiday bonus. Trying to understand what she was implying, I asked, "What are you getting at?" Instead of clarifying, her mood shifted. She became defensive, interpreting my confusion as mockery. "Are you making fun of me?" she snapped. I was bewildered by her strange behavior and persistent questioning. Her accusations seemed out of place, especially since only close family members were aware of the items found in our father's old shed. My sister then revealed what had stirred her curiosity, a recent conversation with our aunt. During this chat, our aunt mentioned receiving a $5,000 gift card from me as a thank you for helping care for our father during his illness. This gesture led my sister to wildly speculate that I must have come into unexpected wealth. She pressed me further, her eyes gleaming with suspicion. "You've come into some money, haven't you? Just admit it," she insisted. Realizing the source of her suspicion, I tried to explain calmly. "It was just a way to show appreciation," I said, but she wasn't convinced. She demanded to know how I could afford such a generous gift, given our modest family finances. I reminded her about the inheritance we had discussed earlier, the dusty old shed on our father's property, which she had dismissed as unimportant. I revealed that inside the shed, we discovered a safe containing a collection of our father's prize watches. These timepieces were a hidden treasure trove that reflected his lifelong passion for horology. Although I didn't know their exact value at the time, I had a feeling they were worth a significant sum, far more than what we had originally expected from his estate. This discovery raised questions about potential inheritance taxes, a concern our mother had mentioned when she learned about the watches. I sought her advice, asking, "What should I do, Mom?" She urged me to handle everything transparently, reminding me that keeping secrets like this would only cause trouble in the long run. Taking her advice to heart, I contacted the lawyer we had worked with previously to understand my obligations. The lawyer explained that whether inheritance tax applied would depend on the total value of the items. Following his guidance, I reached out to the CPA to have the watches properly appraised and ensure that all tax obligations were met. The CPA's evaluation revealed that the collection was worth an astounding $500,000. Given their high value, it was clear that inheritance tax would need to be paid. After much consideration, I decided to keep only a few watches that held sentimental value and sell the rest to collectors who could appreciate them. This approach made financial sense, as it would provide the funds necessary to cover the taxes. The sale of the watches brought in enough money not only to pay the taxes, but also to send thank you gifts, like the one to our aunt, to family members who had supported us during my father's illness. Among the keepsakes, I chose to retain a simple pocket watch. Although it wasn't the most valuable piece, it held deep sentimental meaning for me, reminding me of cherished memories with my father. I shared this story with my sister, showing her the pocket watch and trying to convey its emotional significance. However, her reaction was indifferent. She seemed far more interested in the watches that had been sold rather than the ones I had kept. Her curiosity lingered on what remained in the safe and the items that once belonged to our father. I explained to her that the safe was now stored at our mother's house, emphasizing its significance to my father's business. She appeared thoughtful, but her silence left me uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that she might have ulterior motives. To my relief, my sister eventually left without asking any more questions. However, the sense of unease stayed with me long after her departure. My worries were justified later that night when I received a frantic call from my mother, urging my husband and me to come to her house immediately. As we approached, the scene was alarming. Red and blue lights flashed in the darkness, and police cars were stationed outside my mother's house. Pushing through the small crowd that had gathered, I found my mother shaken and scared. She explained that while she was preparing for bed, she heard strange noises coming from different parts of the house. It sounded as if someone was rummaging through her belongings in a desperate search for something. Alone and frightened, my mother decided to escape through a window rather than confront.